we have something rare. The convergence of public leadership, private capital, and visionary entrepreneurship. So let me be very clear. This is not just another summit. This is a moment. A moment to move from fragmentation to alignment, from hesitation to action, from opportunity to execution. The new LatAm order will not be defined by speeches. It will be defined by decisions, by partnerships, by investment, by courage. So let us use this moment. Let us think boldly, act decisively, and build together a new chapter for Latin America. One that is not only competitive, but inclusive, not only dynamic, but sustainable, not only regional, but global. Because the world is watching, and the future is being written right here, right now. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Soledad O'Brien, and I am going to serve as your MC this morning. We're going to get right into it with our first panel. And our moderator is Jose Felix Diaz, and he is in conversation with the Honorable Francis Suarez.
Good morning. Welcome to Miami if you're not from Miami. And very few stories start in Miami without Francis Suarez and the role he's played in these last few years of turning Miami from a sleepy little city with a lot of potential to what it is today, one of the hottest cities on earth. And I've been lucky and privileged to watch the transformation as a native Miamian, born and raised here in Miami, which is like a rare unicorn. Most of the people you meet these days came from somewhere else. And I had the privilege of meeting Francis early in my career, and our careers have kind of grown in parallel. And it's been fascinating to watch him and his leadership style evolve, transform, and materialize into a great success story for our community. He is a real good human being, more importantly, and a good family man, and he always puts his family first. And I think because he's done that, he's created a community, or helped create a community, where we can all be proud to raise our children in. So with that, Francis, nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too.
I think that this crowd would love to hear a little bit about what you're up to, and I think that it's hard to start the conversation without saying you finished your time in office. You had all these amazing years as a city commissioner, the first mayor born in the city of Miami that became mayor of Miami, the son of a mayor and probably the son of a future mayor or two, the father of a future mayor too. But he has now transitioned. How's that transition going for you?
Well, first of all, Jose, thank you so much. I got a call from Jose yesterday, and I missed the call, which doesn't usually happen because I answer all of Jose's calls. And he called me a second time. I said, oh, this is very weird. I got 2 calls from Jose. And when I finally returned the call, he said, I'm interviewing you tomorrow. I said, oh my God, that's wonderful. I'm super excited. I don't know if there's something with the mic, if it's me here. But I want to start by, thank you. I want to start by, before I talk about Jose and before we talk about Miami and Latin America, of course, is the mic?
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's good? Okay. I want to start by thanking Richard. Richard and Cecilia. Richard had the vision of bringing this conference to Miami. And Alexandra, who's over there, this force of nature that bring this together, this collection of people together in my hometown, believed in us, believed in me. And I remember the first time we opened FII Miami 4 years ago, and I was blessed to have the opening conversation with His Excellency Yasser Aramayan, and I want to thank him as well for his belief and investment in our city. And the person who interviewed us, I don't know if you remember this, Richard, was Tina Powell, who is now the president of Meta. She was, at the time, former broadcast journalist, and she did a phenomenal interview of us. But it's just amazing how life has evolved. And so before I talk about PEP, I would just say that my evolution out of the mayoralty has been a tremendous blessing. Most of you know that I'm an attorney at a major international law firm, Quinn Emanuel. You may not know that I was just recently named president of a global asset management firm called Alpha Wave Global, with $30 billion in assets, run by a good friend of mine, Rick Gerson. I know Jerry knows Rick very well. And I'm going to be announcing soon, I can't tell you what now because I'm under sort of an NDA, that I'm going to be taking a media position, very prominent. And that's going to continue to allow me to have a voice and talk about issues like the one we're talking about today, Miami, Latin America, America, and of course the Middle East, which I'm so incredibly connected to and fond of, as you all know. I would be remiss if I did not thank His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman for his vision in creating this connection as well, and for his constant belief. But before I talk about anything else, I really want to emphasize quickly that Jose and I, as he said, grew up together, politically speaking. And this is a person whose trajectory and career arc I very much admired when he transitioned out of politics. And one of the standards that I looked at is to how to smoothly transition out of politics, how to be successful, how to build a brand, how to work with an incredible organization, which he works for in Ballard Partners. He was a role model for me. And so to the extent that I've made this transition after a couple of months, maybe successfully, it's in great part due to examples that I had and friends that I had that always encouraged me and supported me. Many of them are in the audience, Antonio, Saif, and Ben, and Jeremy, wherever you are, my former chief of staff, who's now working with Richard, and so many of my friends that are here. So let's kick this off, but I've said enough, but I just had to express my profound gratitude because I wouldn't be where I am without people who believed in me, and this organization has believed in me from day one.
Absolutely. So I think you did a good job of framing Miami as a capital of Latin America, but you also framed it as a capital of capital, and were instrumental in trying to recruit some big finance companies and tech companies to Miami. Can you tell us a little bit about how that transition worked?
You know, the first Hispanic mayor of Miami was elected in 1973. He was Puerto Rican. The second Hispanic mayor of Miami was elected in 1985. He was Cuban, and he's my father. Jerry knows him well. And this is from Jerry's Miami time. They took him, and he's built these incredible cities, and now we can't get him back. So Latin America and Miami began that massive intertwinement in the 1970s, and we became known as the capital of Latin America. Why? Because every time something would happen in Latin America that was unfortunate or that was not in the benefit of the people of that particular country, they would come to Miami. They would flee to Miami. And so I always used to say, and this is kind of an unfortunate reality, that we were the beneficiary of other people's dysfunction. And so a lot of times Miami could grow in counter cycles because things that were happening in the aggregate general market didn't affect Miami because our micro market was working differently because Latin America, something was happening in Colombia, something was happening in Brazil, something was happening in Argentina, something was happening in, in Ecuador, and people were coming in droves to America and to their slice of America where they could speak the native language here. Todo el mundo aquí habla español. And they could feel comfortable in their culture and not feel so separated. We were with a couple right now at lunch, and they were reminding us that the flight from Miami to Cartagena is 1 hour. I mean, that's closer than Miami to New York. And people don't realize that. We are incredibly geographically and physically connected, which is, I think, one of the other brilliant parts of Richard's vision of bringing FII to Miami, and then he took it to Brazil, right, is to say, Miami is hyper-connected. He described us very, very well in his opening remarks. And we are now becoming the hemispheric global power. And it's been very intentional. It's been something we've worked very, very hard on. But it would not have happened without our close connection to Latin America and without Latin America's belief in capital infusion into Miami.
Speaking of modern trends, I think that, I tell people at least, that Miami has become, to President Trump, what Chicago was to President Obama. It's really like a fertile
critical
recruiting
mass, yeah.
grounds for top talent. And if you look at the administration, there's so many Floridians on the cabinet. So many of the ambassador choices have come from Florida. What are you seeing in terms of the president's role, the proximity to Mar-a-Lago, and how that has continued to attract more businesses here?
I think it obviously starts with Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who is Cuban-American. And I think for the first time, the United States is really focusing on this hemisphere and understands the strategic imperative in having a hemisphere that works together. When you think about competing with countries like China, which is 1.4 billion people, when you aggregate the population of the hemisphere, we're close to 1 billion people. So it's a very equivalent size sort of economic ecosystem if you can get them to work together. That's a big if, of course, and it's much easier said than done. But then you go down a layer, and if you really even look at Trump 1, you had Carlos Trujillo, which was the U.S. ambassador to the Organization of American States, right? Sort of the umbrella organization. And then he went a layer deeper, and he put Kevin Cabrera in Panama. Panama is incredibly strategically important to the United States because of the canal. We've all heard the president talk about the canal and how important that is. You have Bernie Navarro, who's in Peru. You have, I believe, the ambassador to Argentina is also a Miamian as well, and we've seen President Milei come to Miami a lot, and the Argentinian diaspora is incredibly strong here.
You have Benjamin Leon?
We have Benjamin Leon in Spain, and so Spain obviously can put a claim on being Hispaniola, right? Like sort of where it all started. So you've got this collection of incredibly talented people in business and politics, and as you said correctly, the president. By the way, I mean this guy has incredible capacity. I mean when you think about His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. And you think about the president, you talk about these generational people who have this incredible energy, incredible vision, but tremendous courage. Guys, I was in politics for 16 years. It's the toughest business. I don't care what anybody says. There is no tougher business than politics, and President Trump will tell you that, having been in New York real estate and in television and all the things that he did in construction, development. But he has managed to masterfully manage it, as has the Crown Prince, because, first of all, their focus is long-term, and second of all, they have the courage to make bold decisions. And you've seen that obviously in Venezuela, talking about Latin America. I mean, Venezuela was a migratory crisis for all of South America, right? It was putting a tremendous stress on Colombia, putting tremendous stress on Ecuador, putting tremendous stress on Brazil, on the entire region. Then you have this dynamic of, let's call it conservative and liberal governments, right? And that dynamic, this is my opinion only, was not managed well in the Biden administration. I think the Trump administration is much more proactive in this space. Obviously, you saw what he did in Venezuela, which took massive amounts of courage. A lot of people talk about things. They try to, diplomacy is interesting, right? Diplomacy is what we do. We're talking about things. We're ideating. We're theorizing, as Richard would say. But he's acting in ways that are going to have profound generational impacts. And so the hemispheric world order is being reorganized. Richard mentioned that in his talking points at the beginning. And Miami and the president and the Secretary of State are very intentional. Their strategy is very, very obvious as to how they want integration. They want people to be able to live in where they were raised and where they were born, right? Why do we have this mass migration? Because of lack of opportunity in home country. What happens when COVID exposes that the United States has vulnerabilities in its supply chain? We need to nearshore. We need to understand that we have people in our hemisphere, not just robotics, which will come, that will allow us to deprioritize someone who could become hostile and reprioritize countries that need the wealth, need the structure, and certainly if they get that, there'll be less immigration pressure and people who will want to stay in home country.
You mentioned Venezuela, and I have no doubt that Marco Rubio's fingerprints are all over our strategy in the hemisphere. I don't think anybody understands the hemisphere as well as Marco, at least no Secretary of State of the United States has.
For sure.
But we're also starting to hear some rumblings about Cuba.
Yeah.
And as children of Cuban exiles, what do you think is going to be Miami's role in the future of Cuba? And you could actually inject into there Miami's role into the future of Venezuela.
I'm gonna answer that question by taking a step back and articulating what I think is the president's strategy, which I agree with you has been architected by Secretary Rubio. If you see the strategy, it's all very transparent. He moves battleships into the region, like, I'm coming, hello, right? He starts negotiating. People don't take him serious. Remember Maduro, like, banging the thing and, oh, come take me, come get me. Well, he did, right? And Iran, essentially, he did the same thing. He moved the battleships over there. He started trying to talk to them, trying to negotiate, trying to peacefully resolve the issue. They didn't listen. So I don't think Cuba is that dumb, right? I think Cubans are pretty smart. In fact, most of the people that we talked about that were ambassadors are Cuban, right? So Cubans are smart. I don't think they need a third example.
Well, you could see it in the face of the president, Diaz-Canel.
Sure.
Like,
100%.
he's lost weight, he's stressed. Like,
Yeah.
the weight of what's going on is not lost.
It's not GOP once, by the way, guys.
No.
No.
It's Trump one.
Yeah, Trump point one. So you see this evolution of a strategy of we're going to show force, we're going to try to negotiate, and then we're going to implement force, right? It's a very clear strategy. And I don't think Cuba needs any more evidence that the president has the courage to do something. And frankly, it's the least capable of the three countries, right, to defend itself. In fact, many of you may or may not know this, but the people who were defending President Maduro were Cuban operatives. They didn't do that well against the Delta Force operators that came in. So I think Cuba will fall quickly in the next few weeks, hopefully right in time as I start my media gig so I can talk about it. It's incredible. As a Cuban American, as the first Miami-born mayor, as the first son of the first Cuban-born mayor, I want to go back and visit my country. I've never been able to visit it. My grandfather was a political prisoner. His brother died in a Cuban jail at the hands of Castro. And when you see the juxtaposition from a country like Saudi, where everyone is young, energetic, optimistic, hopeful, focused, investing, right? The future is brighter than the past. And then you go and you see a place like Cuba, which has all these incredible assets. I mean, have you guys ever had a Cuban cigar? I mean, oh, you have one there. Good. That's a contraband here, but no, I'm just kidding. I did that on purpose.
He
I'm
wants to confiscate it.
No, exactly. Yes, you're going to have to give it to me, sir. That's actually a good idea. I didn't think of that. You see this country with all these incredible assets, and yet it is living in a time capsule of the 1950s, right? It's depressing and it's sad and the repression, and you see how things can go bad very, very fast. And so I do think it's going to happen. I think the president's resolve is strong here. I think the Secretary of State's resolve is strong. And I think what people don't understand about Cuba, you might ask yourself in the audience, why? Why is this strategically important to the United States? Why does this make sense? It's a small country. It's not a sophisticated army. They're not developed, so why? They are the exporter of one of the most dangerous things on the planet. It's not nuclear weapons. It's communism. It's socialism. It's the most insidious fraud, or one of the most insidious frauds perpetuated on humanity. And they have become experts at infiltrating in the US and in other places to perpetuate that ideology, and they were trained by the KGB. So they're very good spies, and they're very good at what they do. And they punch significantly above their weight in terms of their ability to succeed with very little resources. So the Secretary of State understands this at depth and understands that if we can fix this problem, we are solving a lot of Latin America's problems, a lot of South America's problems, because, again, I refer back to that titanic battle between I said liberal and conservative governments. It's really not liberal conservative. It's free market and it's socialism, communism. And the socialism, communism is destructive, it's insidious, it leads to repression, it leads to false, no hope, no esperanza, como dicen los hispanos. And so that has to be eradicated for the future of the hemisphere, and it's an American imperative. Why is it an American imperative? Because we should be acting as a bloc, because we do have immigration pressures that we want to resolve. And they shouldn't be resolved necessarily at the border, although the president's done a phenomenal job of securing the border, right? They could be resolved before we get to the border in a way that benefits the United States economically.
Well, I think our time is was well spent. I think it was a perfect
phenomenal.
introduction to Miami and its potential with Latin America. I think that it's a great honor that this type of conference is happening in Miami, because for too long Latin America was ignored by the region. And
Absolutely.
I think that the potential is limitless. And I think with leaders like Francis Suarez and our friends in common, I think that things are heading in the right direction. So thank you, Francis.
If I could just say one last thing, I'll say this. It doesn't take long to turn things around. You saw what President Milei did in Argentina. We've seen what Jerry's done in Doria. You know what I mean? It doesn't take long. Yeah, you can clap for Jerry. He's in Miami. He's a Miami Beach guy, by the way. No, people don't know that. It doesn't take long to turn things around. If you tighten the belt and you have political courage like the president's demonstrating, we can turn things around fast, and we can have a prosperous hemisphere for our country, for the home countries, and for the world. Thank you. It's just
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. So up next is a conversation with a very important figure in the region as the world is changing daily. The acting president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is Her Excellency Delcy Rodriguez Gomez. She joins us virtually. Better. Okay.
¿Ya? Bueno, muy buenos días para los presentes y participantes en esta actividad relevante en el ámbito de las inversiones, de la economía internacional y regional. Quiero felicitar a sus organizadores, a Richard Atías, al Fondo de Inversiones de Arabia Saudita por este encuentro. Yo creo que cuando hablamos de entornos para inversión,
And I think that when we
una
talk
premisa
about environments for
tendría que ser
investment,
la
one of the first premises
desideologización.
would be to
Indistintamente de
ideal,
nuestros
the
pensamientos, que
de-ideologization.
sin duda pueden ser divergentes,
We can
pueda
have different
establecerse
ideas,
ambientes
and
propicios
we
para
should
que los
still
inversionistas
create the proper
encuentren
environment so that
mecanismos
investors can
para que sus
find
inversiones
the
propicien
ways for their
retornos.
investment
En
to
el caso de
create
Venezuela,
returns.
y me gustaría
In the case
pues,
of
tomarme unos
Venezuela,
minutos
I would like
para
to take
explicar
some minutes
la economía
to
venezolana
explain
en
the
un
Venezuelan
entorno
economy
restrictivo.
in a
Venezuela
restrictive environment.
lidera el crecimiento
Venezuela
en América
leads the
Latina
growth
según la
in Latin
CEPAL.
America,
Allí
according to
vemos
ECLAC.
la economía con mayor crecimiento en el
Here we see that it
2025
was the
y
economy with the
en
highest
3 de los
growth in
últimos 4
2025,
años,
and 3 of
Venezuela
the last 4
lideró
years,
el
Venezuela led
crecimiento
South
en
American
Sudamérica.
growth.
De los sectores que más
Out
crecieron,
of the
bueno,
sectors that
construcción,
grew the most,
petróleo,
we have construction,
finanzas
oil,
y seguros,
finance
minería,
and insurance, as well as
19
mining.
trimestres
19 consecutive quarters
consecutivos
of economic
de
growth
crecimiento que han dado ya una
that
tendencia de
show
5 años de
a trend for
recuperación
5
de la
years of
economía,
recovery
repito, en
of our
entornos
economy.
restrictivos por
And I
medidas
repeat, this is
coercitivas
within a
unilaterales.
restrictive
Cuando nosotros
environment
vemos
due to
que la
the
inversión
unilateral coercive measures.
productiva
When we
crece más que el Producto Interno Bruto, estamos asegurando inversiones y garantizando el futuro, lo que se llama estamos sembrando el futuro. Luego quisiera referirme a la recuperación de la industria de los hidrocarburos, que venía en un proceso de crecimiento sostenido. Luego hubo baja de producción en el mes de diciembre por el bloqueo naval y a partir del mes de enero, bueno, eventos. Primer evento es la recuperación de los acuerdos de comercialización entre Petróleos de Venezuela y los Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, que sin duda es un mercado natural para los hidrocarburos de Venezuela, están en nuestro hemisferio. Históricamente ha significado el 40% del mercado de los hidrocarburos de Venezuela, y a ello también se suma el impulso que significa la promulgación de la nueva ley orgánica de hidrocarburos en nuestro país, que da importantes mecanismos y modelos de gestión donde el sector privado, la empresa privada, tiene participación directa tanto en la gestión como en el riesgo, en la producción, en la comercialización, donde existen mecanismos flexibles en el ámbito fiscal y de impuestos sobre la renta, donde además se incorpora los mecanismos alternativos de resolución de conflictos, los arbitrajes nacionales e internacionales. Y allí, bueno, nosotros queremos visibilizar lo que significaría una industria y una economía que pueda tener libertad en el ejercicio soberano de sus competencias y de sus facultades. Siempre hemos tomado una comparación de un país vecino, Colombia. Producción petrolera en Colombia, producción petrolera en Venezuela, históricamente siempre iban acompasados. Si había situación de precios a nivel internacional, se comportaban de la misma manera, pero sin duda lo que ha sido las sanciones marcó una diferencia y se escapan las líneas, vemos la diferencia en cuanto a la progresión de la producción. Bueno, yo quisiera también resaltar un logro muy importante para el año 2025, donde Venezuela finalmente, después de una década, ya tuvo cero importación de combustible. Todo el combustible requerido para la movilidad interna fue provisto por la producción nacional de nuestra industria de los hidrocarburos. Bueno, yo hablaba la importancia de tener entornos positivos. ¿Qué significa entornos positivos? Significa que exista seguridad jurídica y por eso la relevancia de las nuevas leyes, tanto la ley de hidrocarburos ya promulgada como las leyes que se están discutiendo en este momento, que también van a tener incidencia en distintos ámbitos de la economía, pero también resaltar lo que significa el principal motor de la economía, que es el motor de los hidrocarburos. Como Venezuela tiene las mayores reservas petroleras del planeta, 303.000 millones de barriles tiene Venezuela de reserva, y siendo uno de los países también donde los costos de producción son similares a los de Arabia Saudita y constituyen los más bajos en costos de producción del mundo. Pero la nueva ley de hidrocarburos, fíjese la relevancia, cuando nosotros tomamos un barril de petróleo, sus costos de producción, un 64% de ese barril tiene un espacio para la negociación con el inversionista en cuanto a reducción de regalías, reducción de impuestos sobre la renta y, lo más importante, los dividendos que el inversionista. Si hay una gran inversión, obviamente, el retorno será mayor en ese 64%, donde la ley da amplio margen de flexibilidad para la negociación y donde además se establece conforme a estándares y protocolos internacionales. ¿Qué puede mostrar Venezuela? Bueno, la primera reserva petrolera del planeta, de las primeras reservas gasíferas de nuestro hemisferio, con 192 trillones de pies cúbicos, el 80% de ese gas es un gas asociado, con 2.600 toneladas de oro ya aprobadas y 5.200 inferidas, con riquezas en minería, riquezas naturales, con agua, con energía. Es uno de los aspectos más importantes de los sectores que sin duda pueden ser impulsados para el recibo de inversiones y que esas inversiones tengan un ambiente de seguridad. Eso es lo más importante. Aquí hay un número que mostrar. Venezuela es hoy uno de los países más seguros de nuestra región, con 3 homicidios por 100.000 habitantes, cuando América Latina tiene un 16.3% de homicidios por 100.000 habitantes, Ecuador tiene un 33% de homicidios por 100.000 habitantes, Venezuela hoy tiene un entorno de seguridad y estabilidad. Pero hay ámbitos que atender, desafíos, herencias que atender, deudas sociales importantes, por eso que en las etapas de la recuperación, bueno, la estabilización de esas heridas sociales que deben atenderse, la proyección de lo que debería ser el crecimiento económico, que estamos hablando que Venezuela este año, en 2, 3 años, pueda mantener un crecimiento económico de un Producto Interno Bruto de 2 dígitos, es lo importante de que el entorno para las inversiones pueda darse en ámbitos de seguridad, donde el inversionista sepa que indistintamente de alternancias políticas, indistintamente de contexto de restricción, el inversionista sepa que hay seguridad, que hay leyes en Venezuela que permitan retorno de sus inversiones de manera segura. Así que estamos en un proceso de estabilización, de ejecución de reformas que se requieren para ese entorno productivo y para recibir inversiones que permita diversificar los motores productivos de la economía venezolana, como lo estamos viendo, no solamente crecimiento importante en el ámbito de los hidrocarburos, sino también de la construcción, de banca, de seguro, de la minería, de la manufactura, todos los ámbitos de la economía venezolana, y que esa economía venezolana, y yo los estaba escuchando al antecesor, que esa economía venezolana tenga un impacto en la economía regional, que sea un impacto positivo. Venezuela ha impactado en el pasado a través de mecanismos, por ejemplo, como Petrocaribe, mecanismos que fueron direccionados hacia países de nuestro Caribe, vecinos de nuestro país, con países de Sudamérica. Bueno, Venezuela juega un papel relevante en la economía regional y en América Latina y el Caribe. Vemos América Latina y el Caribe y yo llamo a la Unión Latinoamericana. Yo sé la propuesta que tiene el presidente Trump. Sabemos que venimos de momentos de mucha turbulencia en nuestras relaciones bilaterales y agradezco que en este momento estemos ambos gobiernos en disposición de abonar una agenda diplomática constructiva, bilateral, que sea beneficiosa para ambos países. En este momento nuestros diplomáticos se dirigen, están rumbo a Washington, bueno, a establecimiento del diálogo diplomático, político, geopolítico requerido para la vida de las naciones. Pero si nosotros vemos América Latina requiere mayor unidad, requiere mayor integración económica, integración financiera, integración en infraestructura. El principal producto de exportación en el año 2024 fue el petróleo crudo, pero también vemos que las remesas de los migrantes superó a la inversión extranjera directa en el año 2024 con unos números de 161.000 millones de dólares en remesas contra 139.000 millones de dólares en inversión extranjera directa. Una visión hacia nuestra región, hacia América Latina y el Caribe, supone el esfuerzo mancomunado de los países que formamos parte y estamos en este hemisferio para sumar esfuerzos. Somos la región más desconectada del mundo, tenemos mayor conexión con otros continentes, con Europa, con Asia, que entre nosotros mismos. Creo que es una visión mirar hacia adentro en el ámbito también del respeto del derecho internacional y en el respeto de los principios de las Naciones Unidas y el respeto, sin duda alguna, de la soberanía y la autodeterminación de los pueblos. Así que en ese contexto, Venezuela adelanta reformas que llaman a los inversionistas a participar en una economía que, como bien señalé al inicio, tiene 5 años ya de crecimiento, liderando el crecimiento en nuestra región, y de una economía donde nosotros ya la visualizamos libre de todo tipo de sanción, donde el despegue que tendrá nuestro país será tremendo e inmenso. En este poco tiempo que llevo de encargada de la presidencia de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, hemos recibido más de 120 empresas energéticas, principalmente de los Estados Unidos, pero también del Medio Oriente, de Asia, de África, de Europa, que han venido. Si usted le pregunta a la inteligencia artificial cuántas reuniones ha sostenido la presidenta Rodríguez, le va a decir que 236 reuniones en este tiempo. Bueno, yo los invito que se sumen y los invito a Venezuela, que vengan a ver la verdad de Venezuela y no permitamos más que el espacio de diálogo entre nuestros países sea tomado por transnacionales de la comunicación, que sea el diálogo directo, el cara a cara con los gobiernos, el cara a cara con los inversionistas, con los empresarios que puedan venir a Venezuela y ver nuestra realidad. Así que bueno, sé que hay un límite de tiempo, estoy a la disposición para las preguntas que están por venir. Gracias.
Oh, no, Richard's doing Q&A. Richard's doing Q&A.
Thank you, Senora Presidente, for being with us this morning. Since we are short on time, I will ask you 2 questions, please, because I think it's important for the investment community and for the business leaders to really understand what's going on in your country. So I have a very precise question. What are, I hope the President is still online. They disconnected? Okay, so it's good for me, it is saving time. And at least we don't have a dialogue. So maybe we go to the next session, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Sorry about that technological glitch. So the next panel is one that I will be moderating. And this panel is going to focus on a big picture look at the Americas, the challenges it's facing, and some of the forces that are driving growth and opportunity across the region. So I am going to ask you to join me in welcoming my panelists. Norberto Giangrande is with me today, and Francisco Jardim is with me as well. Gentlemen, come on out and join me. Welcome. Waiting for the dramatic music. So let's talk a little bit about how global capital views Latin America. We've been chatting about this all morning. Do you believe that Latin America is entering a new era when it comes to how capital is viewing Latin America as a central growth destination, or are we past that already?
I can kick off. First of all, it's an honor to be here. I believe we have already passed that. When we look at what Latin America has achieved, and it's always good to take a long-term macro perspective, 50 years. I'll use Brazil as a proxy, but I think the rest of the region follows. When I was born in Brazil, it was a military dictatorship. Most of the economy was public. We had recurring currency crisis, and in 50 years, democracy, we solved inflation, privatized most of the sectors, telecom, mining, energy, banking, etc. And we've been able to build very deep capital markets. As we've seen the inflows of capital this year and last year, I think is a good proof.
Yeah. As we are seeing this year, we are seeing a massive inflow of capital to Brazil and for Latam. I think that the region is proving that we are nowadays in this mess that we are seeing around the world is almost a safe haven. We have a good natural resource that like you see in the presentation, a lot of renewable energy. We are the feeder of the world. We have a very, very technological agricultural sector. Our agriculture in Brazil, we grew in the last 20 years almost 8% per year, every year. So I think that in those days, what we are seeing is that what we are building in the last, like Francisco said, that in the last 50 years, at least 50 years, trying to keep the region more stable, democracies. We will have elections this year in Colombia, in Brazil, and I think that it's a huge opportunity to be in Latin America as an investor nowadays.
You mentioned a number of things that really makes Latin America a distinctly competitive destination for long-term capital. What could it become then in, say, 10 years, a dozen years, if you can scale those breakthroughs that have to happen, that maybe people haven't even thought about yet? Why don't you start us off, Francisco?
Perhaps just picking up on one of the points Norberto just raised, food systems. 50 years ago, Latin America was Brazil specifically, was a net importer of food. Today, Brazil, with a population of 220 million people, we provide calories and protein for over 1 billion people. And this has been exponential, 50-year consistent productivity growth in a very sustainable, not only economically, but also in environmental fashion, not going into the Amazon or any of the other characteristics. So that is the starting point. When we look at that starting point and going forward, and we see another point that Norberto emphasized, which is Brazil and Latin America becoming an epicenter of innovation, as we are in multiple categories, agriculture, financial, I believe that we will continue to position ourselves not only as a major provider of commodities, but also as a major epicenter for receiving investments in innovation.
It's a good point, Francisco, that what you will see, talking about my sector, specifically the beef sector, in the beginnings of 2000, we export 50,000 tons of beef to the world. This year, maybe we will do 5 million.
Wow.
It's impressive, and most part of that comes with the new technology, how we increase the productivity of the live cattle. And in agriculture, for example, what Francis said, we are capable to increase more than 2 times the land that we have for the agriculture, only putting more technology without cutting one single tree. So I think that, and all those productivity comes from the innovation, how we put technology, how we have very good people, talent people. It's a huge opportunity to invest also in the region in terms of in education. We are talking about that.
Yeah, and just putting this in context, when we talk about global food security, agriculture is not only the most vulnerable side to climate change, but also to geopolitics. As we've seen over the last couple of weeks, how much nitrogen, urea is vulnerable to the Strait of Hormuz passage, right? So having a country like Brazil that has been able to have such significant growth, we quintupled production of soybean, doubling the area farmed, as Norberto pointed out, and maintaining this throughout the decades, and in a region that is extremely peaceful. We haven't had a conflict in Brazil for over 100 years. I think is a great pitch to attract capital. And on that note, I think the biggest vulnerability we have in expanding growth is human capital and infrastructure. So railways, riverways, ports, and we're seeing a surge in infrastructure investments going on across Brazil right now.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those obstacles, human capital and infrastructure. Why don't you lay out for us what some of those challenges are and how you could see them being overcome?
In these two themes, we have a lot of things to do, a lot of things to develop. I think that's a good opportunity to invest in LatAm. It's not only in Brazil, but in all around LatAm, to help to develop all the infrastructure that we need to build. And in education, we have very good people in the region, but there is a lot of things to do also to learn with what happened in those 200 years here in U.S. So I think that it's a land of opportunity to, if you invest today, I think that for the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think that we will keep receiving the profits from those investments.
Yeah, on this point, I think what we're seeing in Brazil is that entrepreneurs are understanding that there's huge bottlenecks. Education is a key one. If you look at the Brazilian Stock Exchange and at the new startup activity, we see a surge of activity in private education. Entrepreneurs are seeing these huge bottlenecks that the government is not being able to deliver as opportunities to become entrepreneurs and to build businesses, solve these problems, and generate significant shareholder equity.
So are there, I would say, sort of headlines that you think people are getting wrong when they think about those markets at this moment?
Definitely. I think one characteristic that I think we have not been competent in Latin America to command the narrative is on the environmental front and the technological front. As Norberto very well pointed out, our expansion in commodity production has been driven by innovation, entrepreneurship, and private sector growth. Even Petrobras, which is partially state-owned, partially privately owned, is a benchmark of technology for deep soil, deep shore drilling of petroleum. So I think definitely the story that Brazil and the region is a benchmark in commodity, but also in innovation is something that has not been properly addressed.
As Richard pointed in the presentation, I think that FII is more to create impact than anything else. I think that we are in a very good time to create this impact in all the region. I think that we did homework during this last 40 years. I think it's in a good shape. We have good people, natural resources. I think that it's a matter of time that I don't think that we will leave that to be developers countries, but we reach very, very close to the very rich nations in the world.
Yeah, Norberto pointed out about doing the homework. This is something that many times goes undetected. If you look at the region, you see that the homework institutionally is being done consistently over the past few decades. Get Brazil. It's just recent in the previous administration that we approved an independent central bank. And that has enabled the control of inflation, that has enabled credibility in credit markets to become much more widespread. This was something we didn't have in 2014-15 that led to the collapse of the economy and eventually the Dilma impeachment. And every time that we have one of these mistakes, there is institutional correction, the homework is done, the country evolves, and then we can move on to fix the next institutional challenge. But this is, I think, the key of a democracy. We fix things and we move forward to the next problem, even if it's not the speed we want. It's been continual progress.
There was a time when Latin America was sort of seen as the supplier of last resort. And I think many people would argue that that evolution has happened. But how long and how do you get to the strategic anchor of a global supply chain stability?
For sure, and I think this was proven in all of the recent disruptions. If we look at 2020, when we had the pandemic, Brazil hit records of exports of beef and soybean throughout the toughest months of the pandemic, showing that our supply chains are resilient even when we saw multiple others collapse. If you look at the 2023 onwards, when you had the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the same. Even though there were fertilizer and seed disruptions, Brazil continued to deliver on food security. So I think Brazil has had the privilege of being able to address and surpass every single global crisis, maintaining delivery of its core shipments.
I have a very answer for this question, very specific. What we are seeing today in the US is the shortest supply of beef ever. Even with the tariffs that we had, all the problems that we had last year, we found ways to keep exporting beef to US to keep the supply of the internal market, to keep giving the supply to the internal market of US. It's a way to how to control inflation, internal inflation, and I think that if you have more stability in terms of the geopolitics, in terms of tariffs, I think that we have everything, all the resource to keep being the safety haven of food supply for all the world.
You're mentioning a couple of things, but I'm curious if there's a longer list of the issues that are really constraints on the region from sort of getting to where you believe it could be. Maybe you should start us off.
Yeah, I mean, I would point out two that I think we mentioned, but I think are significant. One is infrastructure. 40% of Brazil's bumper harvest this year does not have warehousing capability. So, especially in a world where you have these kinds of disruptions, that's extremely dangerous, but it's a major opportunity for us to invest. And that has been one of the triggers of the recent Brazilian miracle of corn ethanol. Ethanol is a great way to warehouse corn, and this has been exploding, and it also ties in with our biofuel leadership. The other one, as Norberto very well pointed out, probably the most important and difficult to fix is human capital. Our education statistics, if you look at PISA scores and other metrics, are way below where our core competitors are. And again, this is something that I think is a major opportunity, especially with AI and other technologies, for us to invest in education and try to fix this gap as soon as possible.
Is there anything that you would add to that list?
Yes. I think that we are, as Francisco said, that if you have the right infrastructure, if you have the right geopolitics calm, have a world with a geopolitics more calm. I think that yes, we have a huge opportunity to become to keep being the best global player in food security and in technology also. There's something that Francisco said before, that what happens with central bank, with Dilma. I think as a developed country, there is always some noise, but you need to see this noise, but see, look for what will happen ahead. With the resources that you have, what you can keep doing. So always be noise, but we keep delivering what the growth, what we were able to do to deliver.
You both mentioned, oh, forgive me, and feel free to jump in with your answer as well. You both mentioned homework, and I'm just curious if you feel like the region has been applying, lessons learned over the past 50 years effectively.
Yes, and one specific achievement this year that is a major lesson learned, one consistent problem of Latin America has been protectionism. And after 30 years, in May, the EU-Mercosur agreement is coming into play, right? This is creating the largest free trade group market in the world, over 700 million consumers. I think this is a great example of picking up on a lesson learned, that protectionist economies are horrible for consumers. This encourages productivity. We have a free trade negotiation agreement with Canada, which will be transformational for us as well. So I think that opening up and being able to have freer markets, picking up on the anti-protectionist agenda is a major lesson learned.
And I was born in a military, doing the homework. I was born in a military government in Brazil. Since then, we stabilized our democracy. We have direct elections for the last 35 years. We saw the government, presidents going out to the government. But I think the institutions in Brazil works. And not only in Brazil, in the region. We saw that in Uruguay. We are seeing that in Paraguay. It's doing an amazing job. Argentina is changing a lot. Colombia is doing okay. Venezuela is changing. Mexico is doing very well also. I think that all the region, we have noise, but I think that we are keeping delivering growth and resource for the world.
Our last question for you both. Is there one long-term bet in the region that you would make that people in this audience might say, oh, that's crazy?
Well, I'm going to do something that in Brazil you would normally be laughed out of the restaurant, the bar, wherever you make it, which is Argentina. Picking up on what Norberto said, what Milei has been able to achieve in 2 years of fiscal responsibility, the recent labor reform, starting to free flow to the peso, is transformational. And remember, just to give a statistic, Brazil has 220 million people and we never won a Nobel Prize. Argentina has 4 Nobel Prizes. They have an outstanding human capital base. The most valuable company in Latin America is is Mercado Libre, Argentinian. The first 3 unicorns in Latin American history were Argentinian. An incredible country, having that economy becoming the well-deserved tiger that they should be based on their track record institutions, their long-term track record, not the recent track record, is a major transformational. And that is a bet that I am making and that I highly recommend people keep in the radar.
Well, and then one of the most valuable fintechs in the world is also just come from the region, from Brazil, from a Colombian guy, the Nubank. A bet that I think that there's so many opportunities around the region that infrastructure in Brazil, manufacturing in Paraguay, for example. Argentina, it's in an unbelievable moment now to invest there. I think that you need to be on the ground and look for so many opportunities in many sectors.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much, Norberto. And Francisco, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Fantastic. Up next for us, Cecilia Atias is the founder and president of the Cecilia Atias Foundation for Women, and of course, the former First Lady of France. Today, she is in conversation with Her Excellency Maria Jose Pinto González Artigas, the Constitutional Vice President of the Republic of Ecuador.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you. This is my Vice President, Jose Pinto. Okay? Yes, we're good. And we decided to speak in English. I think it's going to be easier. She brings a rare combination of business experience and a strong commitment to social impact, now at the highest level of Ecuador. And I'm happy to have you this morning. Ecuador is going through a challenging moment, but also a moment full of opportunity. And your leadership really sits at the heart of this transformation. Madam Vice President, thank you very much for being with us today. It's a true pleasure to have you. I will start with a very simple question. Maybe the other one is not working.
Hello.
Yeah, that's good. If you had to convince this room in one sentence, why invest in Ecuador today?
Well, thank you for being here, everybody, for believing in the region in Latin America and Ecuador. Ecuador is a quite small country. We're 18 million, around 18 million people, but we're a country that it's diverse. We have the Amazon, the Amazon meet the highlands, the highest Andes. We have the coast, and we have, I'm sure you know, the Galapagos Islands. So it's a small country where everything meets. We have young people full of potential. We are resilient, and we're creative. And you're facing with a young market. Mm-hmm. It's not a very mature market. And it's the opportunity to invest in shaping the future. And that's what we're searching. It's new investment and investments from around the world to shape the future that we want for Ecuador, that we want the opportunities that we want for the younger population.
So it's 18 million people, of young people in your country, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the one reform that could really unlock foreign investment in the next 2 years?
Well, we've been shifting, or since President Noboa it's in the presidency, we have shifted.
For how long has he been?
He was, for the first term, he was 18 months,
yes.
And we're already 11 months.
Okay.
10. So we've shifted from seeing social investment as a cost and seeing it as the foundation of economic growth. And that is very important to know because we're prioritizing problems like chronic malnutrition, early pregnancy, and working in the social issues that actually will shape the future. This is like early childhood, health, education, water systems, and sanitation. And you have to remember that there are no isolated policies. Everything has to come together, and the strategy is to unite the government with the private sector, with foundations, with international agencies to work together to form the same path, toward the same path, but working with people and for people. And well, for the government, that means relocating resources. And for investors, it means to start looking beyond short-term returns.
Yeah.
And understand that investing in people, investing in prioritizing prevention and long-term human capital will shape the growth of our countries, of Latin America, and of course, of the people.
Security is obviously a key concern.
Right.
What could you say to reassure the investors about security?
Well, security, we're working in two sides about security. We're working, of course, in security with the armed forces, working in territories, trying to get rid of illegal mining and illegal armed forces. But it's a work that you have to do also in the social areas. So we're prioritizing, and we're starting to work in working against recruitment of young children, and working in prevention of chronic malnutrition. In Ecuador, still 1 over 5 kids has stunting, has chronic malnutrition, and it's the best investment you can do in Latin America and in our countries to get rid of these big social issues.
You worked
The World Bank tells you that if you invest $1 in chronic malnutrition, in the future, you will have a return of $23. So that's what we're shaping. That's what we're turning to, shaping people, education, culture, and overall working with early childhood and younger children.
Thank you. We hear a lot about nearshoring. Do you believe this is Latin America's moment? And where is Ecuador standing at?
Yes, of course. We are, I don't know if you know, everybody, where Ecuador is, but it's right in the middle. That's why we're called Ecuador. So it's a very strategic location. We're a small country surrounded by very big ones, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Venezuela. So it's a strategic. There's a lot of companies that have already tried their products in Ecuador to upscale to other countries in Latin America. So yeah, it is a strategic. It's the nearshoring. It's not just about geopolitics. It's also about a new efficient and sustainable way of buying and exchanging either products, either culture or sports. And that's what we're working towards, to be one of the innovation hubs in Latin America.
You were talking about children malnutrition. I think you worked a lot in that field. What needs to be done?
Right.
Again, what do you think you have to do
now?
So,
in a lot of the social issues, we've been working in this special triangle that I call it. It's the government working with international agencies and foundations and the private sector. Why the private sector? Because development, it's part of human development, it's part of economic growth. And it's very important for us and for the private sector to work together with the government to explode or to increase the work that our government already does. In chronic malnutrition, we're already seeing solutions in different parts of the country, and so it's easier to work together towards the same path. And that's what we're working. It's one of the work that we're doing. It's working together, everybody working towards the same goal, and that's working in health, in nutrition, in education to upscale the growth of Ecuador.
You were working in malnutrition in an association, I think, before the government. What were you doing? You were
this is quite new for me. I've been working in politics just for 3 years. Before that, I worked in the private sector. And what what the private sector does in Ecuador, I don't know, mostly around the world, it's work with their own territories, with their own communities. We believe mostly in Ecuador, and the private sector believes that if you work around your community and if you work towards reshaping that community with dignity, with better education, with better health, at the end, the growth will come to you as well. And that's what we're working with in social. It's that if you invest in people today, you will shape the future of the country. Not only if you're in government, but if you're in the private sector as well, and of course, the future of the economic growth in the region.
especially with the youth.
Exactly.
How do regional developments, especially in Venezuela and Cuba, affect Ecuador today?
It was already discussed, but we have a lot of immigration. We had several years ago a lot of Cuban immigration. Now we have a lot of Venezuelan, and still we still have it. And the thing is that in Ecuador, education, health, and a lot of services are free of charge. So we have to give those services again to immigrants, and that's how it has shaped our communities and shaped our country, because all of the services that we give, they have to be free for immigrants as well. And we have several problems in the social areas that we're working towards solving. But one of the biggest problems was the social issues that we have. In health, let's say, the social problem that we had in health, it's that the kids that came from Venezuela weren't vaccinated. So we have several issues in the health area as well. In education, not all the kids are inscritos. I don't know how to say that. They are in school.
In school.
They are not in school. So the government has to work to search for immigrant kids from mostly from Venezuela, and have them inside the schools in Ecuador. So,
how many migrants are we talking about?
I'm not sure in the number, but I'm sure
it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
So we have a little time left. I would like to know, as a woman in leadership, what is the biggest challenge you're facing?
Oh, what a tough question.
One of lives
it's,
that you
it's
have to
two different
handle.
lives, it's two different jobs. And the thing is that for me, it's an immense privilege working for my country, for to shape the growth and economic growth of Ecuador. So it's a privilege, but I also have 3 kids at home that need my attention, and that finally I'm their mother. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that women in politics, and not only in politics, but when you work in the private sector.
It's everywhere in the world.
It's everywhere. But I also think that being a woman, I have the, I don't know how to say this, but in the social area, you have a different feeling. It's each time I go to a hospital, I visit a hospital, I visit the school, and I see the faces of my kids reflected in every children of Ecuador, and I know that we have to work together with the private sector, with international agencies, with new investment to other countries for them, because they need better opportunities in our countries, not outside of them. So we're searching for that, to give them hope, to give them opportunities, and that's why we've opened Ecuador to the world.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mrs. Vice President.
Thank you.
It was great having you. And now I think you're coming back with another panel. This wasn't working.
Physical infrastructure in Latin America. What are the strategic options that we have today? What are the exciting things that we can do in Latin America to invest and grow the infrastructure problem that we see there, or as we like to say, the infrastructure gap? Welcome, everyone. Today we're discussing Latin American infrastructure and the strategic inflection point we stand at today. We have an exceptional panel. To start with, we have the Vice President of Ecuador here with us today, Maria Jose Pinto. She brings deep experience in public-private collaboration and national development. We also have Manfredi Lefebvre de Ovidio, Chairman of the World Travel and Tourism Council, who offers a global perspective on tourism and infrastructure-driven growth. We also have with us today Joe Sitt, the Chairman and CEO of Thor Equities Group. He oversees major real estate and mixed-use projects across Latin America, connecting capital to large-scale development. And finally, Juan Carlos Cepeda, the CEO of Quantum Energia and partner at MIP Real Assets, and he brings expertise in energy policy, regulation, and private energy generation. Let's start with Vice President Pinto and Mr. Cepeda today. Latin America has long promised infrastructure growth, but today the states are different. Global supply chains are shifting, nearshore, energy bottlenecks are growing, and the region's strategic importance in the Western Hemisphere is drawing both capital and political attention. Tell us more about this unique moment and how it fits into long-term infrastructure investment.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to shift a bit from the social to the infrastructure. We're in a very special moment in Ecuador where we decided, well, President Noboa decided, that we have to build the first national museum in Ecuador. And it's not only infrastructure that we're building identity, we're building communities, we're building tourism. So it's a very special infrastructure project that it's not talking only about buildings, but it's talking about communities, investment. We already had the first stage. There's a lot of architects from around the world involved, and yeah, we're open to mixed investment around it. It's going to be in the capital. So yeah, it's normally when we speak in Latin America about infrastructure, we speak either of housing, of national housing, or we speak about energy, or probably hotels. But most of the times we don't speak about cultural infrastructure, and I think that's one of the probably possibilities of investment in Latin America, the region, and now in Ecuador, in the capital, in Quito.
What about the energy perspective?
Well, Deborah, you are so right. There is a geopolitical rewiring of supply chains. This decoupling between the US and China is changing the whole supply chain in LatAm. Let me give you a couple of facts. Since 2023, Mexico became the main source of US imports. At the same time, together with Canada, in a tie with Canada, we are the main destination of US exports. So this national US strategic planning that have come in recent years is shifting completely supply chains. Nearshoring is a reality. Nowadays, in Mexico, many international companies are looking for a place to develop industrial parks. And our challenge, and what we do in Mexico and in LATAM, is to supply the energy that this new real estate, industrial real estate, is requiring. So what we do in MIP is that we put together infrastructure funds to power the nearshoring, to power this rewiring of supply chains. It's a reality. It's a great opportunity. And we have done it before for power in Mexico, for highways, for different social infrastructures.
Can you talk a little bit about the bottlenecks?
Yeah, I mean, which are the bottlenecks? If you want to go on in Mexico and place a real estate, industrial real estate, to be part of the nearshoring, which are the challenges? The first challenge is power. I mean, and which are the bottlenecks there? Then the national grid needs to be expanded. And the Mexican government is doing quite a good job there, but it's taking time. In most of the cases, what we are doing, Deborah, is that we are going behind the meter. We are, especially for data centers, and this is an international trend. Data centers are so hungry for energy that in many cases you cannot interconnect to the grid. You need to bring the power systems behind the meter. So power is a challenge, and we are delivering that to get around the bottleneck. Another challenge, but it's also at the same time a good opportunity, is water. Industrial parks need energy and they need water. Those are the challenges, the bottlenecks, but that's what we are for, to bring infrastructure, to bring investment, to figure out a solution to that.
Joe, you have so many investments in Mexico at the moment. You're one of the biggest players there, if I understand correctly, or the biggest. Which infrastructure sectors would you say, energy, industrial, and logistics, or tourism-linked assets, are best positioned to deliver predictable, multi-decade returns in our current geopolitical context?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having us here today. I start with this statement when I describe Mexico. Ahora es la tiempo para México. La verdad. This is the time for Mexico, and it's also the time for Latin America in general. And the only thing that's standing in the way of that opportunity is Mexican government and Mexico itself, the same way the rest of Latin America. Today, the world's changed. You know, so much of the wealth creation, the advancement, you always thought of the big Western countries of the world, like Europe. But if you really look deep under, the global South is really changing things. And oftentimes when you mention the global South, people sometimes think about in India, think about certain parts of Asia, and they forget a humongous part of the global south is actually Latin America, and probably the one best positioned to have success and be part of the growth of the future. And as I often say, the biggest problem they have, or the biggest risk they have, is themselves. They need to be pro-business, thinking about that accommodation. And so you spoke about energy. We happen to be a company that's in most all food groups. You know, we're very active in the data center world. We're extremely active in the industrial world, like Monterey, let's say, in the nearshoring side. And we're extremely active in super luxury, hospitality, and home building to service the West, maybe Americans, but doesn't matter. The beneficiary is Mexico. And in each of those food baskets, we often bump into the challenges. Probably the biggest challenge, as you said so wisely, is the industrial side, and specifically data center. Like ourselves, we've got globally 78 different data center projects that are at any different phase, and we would so much love to see that expanded in Mexico. But the challenge has been the energy, as you said, and the government focusing on it. I will say I have more faith now. I know the Morena, the party, you know, Scheinbaum, people had trepidations before, and maybe during campaign people say things that maybe they think that their, let's say, forgive the word, woke mentality is going to work, and then sort of reality starts to set in. And we've started to see that change in our administration, that care, and part of it, you see the partnership with the United States. So we're excited. I think that all the business communities, whether it's Mexico, whether it's in Ecuador, whether it's any one of those countries, have to be more vocal, more communication with government, more partnering with government to get them to understand it's a cycle. If you help us, we win. If we win, the people win. If the people win, you as their leader win.
Can we talk a little bit about these public-private partnerships? Are there some that have been very successful in certain countries and others that maybe are not as successful? Maybe there are some that are great ideas, but they just, for whatever reason in practice, don't work out and aren't used as much?
Me. Well, you know, first of all, I'm a consul of Ecuador in Monaco, and I lived in Mexico for many years. So I'm a great fan of Latin America. And we all know that when something happens around the world, Americans tend to travel vertically down to South America. So what is the biggest obstacle?
Your microphone is not working at the moment.
So what is the biggest obstacle? Of course, infrastructure. Demand is there. The possibility to access much less. I know because we have ships in Ecuador, in the Galapagos, and it's always the airlift. To have a successful development in tourism, first of all, you need transportation. So I think as a data, Latin America has about 50% more population than North America. It has only 5% of the global travel in air transportation, and North America 23%. So only this gives you the bottleneck that there is with transportation. And we know the basic infrastructure everywhere we go is not only the airport, is availability of communication, airplanes. I always say airlines are basic infrastructure. And if countries want to develop travel and tourism, you have to.
And I don't need to, it's already, I don't need to.
You have to incentivize in every way you can that infrastructure. A place is developed if you can access it. Otherwise, it can be the most beautiful place in the world. We'll never go there. Public-private, now it's become part of the culture that infrastructure, including airports, airlines, and all the rest, are not government only. They're being privatized. And all over the world, there are businesses that can be very profitable. There are places through which people pass. Airport can be very lucrative. And so by developing airports, you develop traffic, people come, the business is successful, the flights are successful, airports are successful, and the communities can have a lot of work. Now I think Latin America averages 10% of the population has a job in travel. In Greece, I think it's 18%. Most Latin American countries can have these kind of developments. If you think about, simply think about Ecuador. I've been many times. It's a magical place. you don't only have Galapagos. Everybody goes there for the Galapagos. It has the Andes, the communities around there, Quito or San Francisco de los Quitos. Yes. So in all of Latin America it's this way. So I think that is the first thing. Of course, then if you build hotels, you have to have electricity, water, and all the rest. But
yeah.
Let me tell you a
Jump in.
successful story about public-private partnership that I think it can work in many different areas. And this is the way we have been powering 15% of the electricity in Mexico is being powered by one of our funds, which is actually a public-private partnership. In our fund, it's a public-listed fund named FIEMEX. 65% of the equity was invested by our Mexican Sovereign Infrastructure Fund. So you could say it's a kind of public entity, public not only in the listed way, but also with public resources. And we have bring together the Sovereign Mexican Fund together with the Mexican pension funds. This is a privately managed fund in which government has the largest share, public pension funds, private public pension funds work together, and also we issue an international bond in the capital market. So we have international investors working with Mexican pension funds and the Mexican Sovereign Fund. This large fund produces and manages 15% of the electricity in Mexico. It's a success story. We have done it in MIP. We have done it similar structures for highways. It's a beautiful scheme. It works very nicely. And we're looking to use the same scheme to power the nearshoring phenomenon in Mexico.
Joe, so, I mean, where's the big money? Would you say it's in the tourism infrastructure? Is it in the industrial infrastructure? Is it somewhere else? Where are you really focusing your energy these days?
Well, first of all, I'll start by saying this. Just the fact that FII is focused on Latin America today, you know, it shocks a bunch of people, but that says a lot. That means some smart minds are starting to realize the opportunity that's there. I think until now, or at least over the last 5, 10, 20 years, they've been missing, capital has been missing the opportunity. I'll talk Mexico, but it's all over Latin America, the opportunity. To have a marketplace, in terms of safety, rule of law, et cetera, while every once in a while you'll hear about a challenge in terms of safety, cartel, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot safer than where I live in New York City, as an example. If you look down at the statistics, it's a government that wants to grow. So much of the business is actually an export product, tourism, to the United States of America. If you think of actually the country and the way the geography lays out in the United States, here where we are, you sort of get that tail that comes a little south. But the western half of the United States, by the time you hit that type of weather or that geography, you're already in Mexico, whether it's Cabo or Nayarit, et cetera, and the growth, et cetera, is fantastic. If
So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but the security challenges, you mentioned that. What are these governments doing to mitigate some of those security challenges? You talked about the drug cartels. We know the U.S. is getting involved now in Ecuador and in Mexico in various ways. Are you seeing that is helping mitigate these issues? Have you come across these problems in your own investments?
I know it was sensitive. Some people feel like, oh, is America overstepping their own boundaries, et cetera. So far, it's been, talk about partnership, I think it's been a good partnership between the United States and those Latin American countries that have been partnering with them. I think the Latin American country themselves is the beneficiary. Meaning, if the United States gets involved in any country, and then we'll talk at the most extreme example, Venezuela and what just happened, who's going to be the biggest winner of what America just did? Venezuelans, the person on the street. It'll take time, bring in the infrastructure, build back the country, et cetera, but I think it's win-win, whether you're Ecuador, whether you're Mexico, whether any parts of Latin America. And I think it's an important part for capital. You know, that might have been one of the things holding it back. And you really see the disconnect. What's interesting is FII, obviously we know where it sourced from, the capital, the Middle East, et cetera, the wealth that's there in the Gulf is just tremendous. The sovereign wealth funds, et cetera. And here you've got a market that could potentially give them returns that are ginormous. Not even returns where they need to exit, where they could just own the asset, being property businesses. The yields are as good, if not better, than the IRR they hope to get.
Where are those deals? What are these great long-term investment ideas that you have?
I think throughout Latin America, but obviously my company, Thor Equities, we lean heaviest in Mexico. We're also doing projects in Belize. We just bought a 260-acre island. We're doing a Four Seasons entire island resort with a Greg Norman golf course. We've got our own runway, et cetera. We built our own infrastructure.
So tourism, you're leaning towards.
It's really everything. I'll start with tourism. Two examples, one on that coast. The other, we just did a project that we just grand opened, Nayarit, Mexico. We did a Ritz Reserve Hotel. We did 300 homes with the Hula School. We've got everybody from a Peyton Manning to the #1 boxer, #1 race car driver, top 4 of the top 10 golfers in the world. We built a golf course that Fazio did, golf course that's in extreme and luxury. You want to play golf at 1 a.m., you tell us, we'll flip on a light switch. You can play golf at 1 o'clock in the morning.
That's what you want to do, huh?
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
sleep, huh?
It's incredible. And then whether we talk about the data center, the industrial nearshoring that he mentioned, you know, with the changes going on with tariffs and international trade, et cetera, Mexico should be a humongous net beneficiary of that as well. So we like it. Our challenge has been we're money managers, so to speak. Some of it is our balance sheet. Some of it is capital we manage around the world, is seeing people do what we're doing today, having FII highlight Latin America so that the world can know. Like I said, so much of the capital base got built in the northern hemisphere, and now you see that change. People are waking up to the global south all over the world. They need to wake up to the opportunities in Latin America as the best return on investment.
I want to add something there, and it's important for investors to know that, again, you're not catching up with a mature market. It's a region where you can still shape that trajectory of growth. We are young, resilient, creative, and there's a very big opportunity to shape the growth, economic growth of Latin America and of our countries. And I think that's the most important thing that you need to know about Latin America. There's a lot of investment going on, a lot of shaping the future still.
There's some tax incentives that are being offered in Ecuador. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of tax incentives right now in Ecuador because we believe in private investment, in international investment. We're trying, and we've been working for the last years to gain the trust again from the private sector, and yeah, there's incentives for construction. There's incentives if you invest in education, if you invest in energy, if you invest in malnutrition, if you invest in sports. So there's a lot of cultural and health incentives to, again, invest in people to get that economic growth that investors need.
Mr. Cepeda, I can't help but ask you, since Joe talked about Venezuela, there's all this excitement around oil production in Venezuela. As we know, it's one of the largest oil reserves in the world. How realistic do you see that timeline going forward of really bringing up the production levels? Do you see any opportunities right now in Venezuela and in Cuba, considering all of these shifting geopolitics around oil?
Well, happy that you asked me for that. I mean, you remind me my old days as a hydrocarbon regulator. Yeah, absolutely, great opportunity for Venezuela. I mean, it's the #1 oil reserve country. So yeah, it's great opportunity for oil production. But let me highlight also and never forget about gas, natural gas. because gas brings you productivity. And here comes again the nearshoring and the rewiring of the supply chains. The US is the largest producer of natural gas at the lowest price. And Mexico, we have the benefit of being able to import natural gas from the US. We are the largest importer of natural gas from the US. We import around 7 billion cubic feet per day. By the way, our power plants consume one of those 7 billion cubic feet per day. But that gives us great productivity. And what we do with all that gas, we produce, we manufacture goods, and we export that to the US. So it is a very highly interconnected supply chain. And this natural gas that comes from the US to Mexico, there is an opportunity. This has been thought for a long time, but we believe we can make it happen to extend the natural gas pipes that come from the US to Mexico to take them to Central America. That will bring productivity as well to the region.
Mr. Dovidio, what lessons can be learned from tourism infrastructure that could be applied to some of this industrial or energy infrastructure? Are there some lessons that you think have been learned from creating more infrastructure for tourism that can be applied?
Well, for sure. I mean, everything which is facilitate. I'm not specifically in the infrastructure field, no. Mm-hmm. I'm moving passengers. For example, cruising. No, we need terminals. If you want to bring passengers, you need terminals. Terminals can be a perfect partnership between private and public because they are profit centers. You can have shopping centers and all the rest. So this is my experience about that. I wanted to add a word about the United States. So as Europeans, we know very well that having a big brother is a very positive thing because we've remained a liberal continent thanks to the United States. And it's not only positive from a geopolitical point of view, it's positive from every point of view. So if you can have the support of the United States to support public order, everything, because also the capital will come mostly from the United States. Biggest part of the capital is from the United States. Now, Ecuador is blessed because it has somebody as the president who understands business. He's one of the biggest businessmen of Ecuador. So he knows very well that you need to have the trust of investors, and that investors are mostly in the United States. And the technology is mostly here. Who could have done what happened in Venezuela? Nobody. This country did it. And they did it in just one evening, one night. So I think that if you go beyond public-private, you go between countries supporting, the market for Latin America for travel is the United States. The rest will be trickle. A bit fewer Europeans, yes, but I mean, some Asians. But the basic is North Americans. So you need their trust, and you need infrastructure for them, but you can access their support and you can access their capital. So of all the private-public, I would say there is global PP, how you call it, not private part.
Public-private partnership.
Yeah, but no, this is a different one. It's a global public partnership, which I say is a basic of the success of Latin America. And Miami is the proof. Most of the flights for Europeans who go to Latin America pass through Miami. So it's the biggest hub. It's not only the city where most of the people speak Latin, but it's also, if you want to go to Latin America, you have to pass through Miami. Well, it's a bit absurd, no, that Latin America doesn't have other hubs. So you have to develop them. And so this is the basic thing. Make the flow of people easy and make it also that people feel safe. Us, as WTC, I have a 3-year mandate. The basic thing that I'm going to work on is facilitating travel. Global connectivity, that relates to airports, everything which will make travel seamless. Because if you know that you can arrive in a place and pay easily, it's much better and people will feel comfortable. So that is the basic thing. So there's also the digital infrastructure that we're going to develop. I think we're going to work on it.
The digital infrastructure.
Digital. Yes.
You mean like fiber optic cables, that sort of thing?
No, digital infrastructure means if you have to check in a hotel, now they give you a piece of paper, you have to fill it, you have to sign it. Why don't you have a code number? You just show that and you are checked in. And that can be expanded. Visas eventually will be with passports. We all will be, have a digital document to travel, which will say everything about us. And of course, payments. We have in the room a big expert of stablecoin from Liechtenstein. But I mean, I see him. So that's, you know, now you have to pay your hotel. You want to make a draft?
I love that question about payments because we're sitting here with the Vice President of Ecuador and you guys dollarized, right, many years ago. What would you say about the dollarization in Ecuador? What kind of benefits did that bring and what disadvantages do you think it might have as well?
Well, it brought trust from the people. I was small when we dollarized. So when people ask me, what do you think about your life with before the dollar or after, I'm 40 and I don't even remember. So there's a trust behind the dollar that people feel already. And for younger people, it's the normal. It's our normal currency. It's easy and for traveling, it's quite easy. You can exchange. It's easier to get to the digital era because we're dollarized. So what it brought to people, it's trust in the currency, trust in the banks, trust in formal in formal economy, and the downside of it was the drug dealing. Because we're dollarized, we're the hub for money laundering. Because it's easier to launder in dollars than in other currency. So that was the downside. But for us, for the younger people of Ecuador, it's what we have, what we've lived with, what we've studied with. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's been such a pleasure to chat with all of you about some of the challenges and the unique opportunities that we have looking forward in Latin America. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, here's my card.
Let me give you my card.
Pleasure listening to you.
No, thank you. Thank you.
You weren't the group that partnered with Jared Kushner.
We are now going to
No, I know that he was also looking.
Thank you so much. We are now going to carry on the conversation. We are going to be moving from physical to digital infrastructure. And we're going to be looking at where the money is accumulating in the digital economy and what that reveals about the region's next phase of growth. We have a formidable panel, so please join me and welcome our panelists to the stage. Thank you. Well, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here today. Well, as I think we all know, across the Americas, a new generation of digital native companies is attracting global venture and institutional capital, really reshaping the region's innovation and investment landscape. And indeed, venture funding across the Americas surpassed $180 billion in recent years. So we've discussed we'd like this to be a really spontaneous panel, so anyone feel free to jump in, but I'd just like to begin with an initial question about fundamentals. And I'm wondering, how do the fundamentals of the digital economy differ between North America and Latin America in terms of infrastructure, capital access, and consumer behavior? Where are you seeing the most opportunities? Just an easy one to ease you all in. Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll correct you. I'm sorry to do this.
Do it.
North America includes Mexico.
Okay.
So
Fair, yes.
Canada, US, and then Latin America.
Okay.
Which is often misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason that there's so much connectivity across the Americas that I think we're now waking up to that has not been as appreciated in the past cycle. And I think capital flows across the entire region are accelerating. So I've been investing in Latin America since 2018, when the ecosystem there was $3 billion a year. In 2021, it was $17 billion a year, and now it's back to 3. That 17 was all driven by US capital coming in and going out. So I'd say the biggest phenomenon is when the US is interested in Latin America, you get a ton of capital, and when it's not, it all disappears. There is no stable base to keep the engine running, and that's still the case today.
Anyone with experience? Jerry, Emiliano, what's your experience been as both founders and people who scaled up businesses in Latin America?
Yes, as a founder building in Latin America, having grown up close to that U.S.-Texas border, I've seen kind of how important that relationship between Latin America and North America is, and Mexico kind of sits squarely in the middle of both of those categories. Yeah. You have the most trade between any two countries, being between Mexico and the United States, of any two countries in the world. But I think there's a massive opportunity, though, to see the region, Mexico, to see Latin America as not just a factory for the United States, but also as a hotbed of innovation, right? Where there's a lot of need, there's a lot of large incumbents that have been inherited from state-owned enterprises at times, or a lot of concentration, and so the region is screaming, right, for innovators, like ourselves, some here on this stage, and I think we've kind of seen waves, and Shu was behind a fund that invested quite a bit in the region, and I think that's creating a lot of examples for the region, and I think a lot of learnings as well to how to better deploy capital, and so I think we're actually very optimistic that today you see funds, you see businesses that are investing in very capital efficient ways that make it actually a really prime moment to double down in the region.
Emiliano, what's your experience been?
I think my experience has been fairly similar to Jerry's, and I believe that in a way there is a massive talent pool in Latin America that still needs to be developed, and that requires a massive amount of capital, and still some of the basics need to happen and need to be developed. Take, for example, infrastructure for the digital economy. That's something that still needs significant investment to enable and for talent to truly flourish and be able to capitalize on this opportunity that Latin America as a region is in itself.
But if I may interrupt,
yeah, please
in the
do.
Spirit of interrupting,
please do.
You're building very different businesses, right? A payments company, and then fiber. And part of what we were talking about backstage was all this venture capital, which is only one flavor of capital, hasn't liked what you're doing as much as it's liked what you're doing, even though both are completely necessary for the development of the region. I mean, putting fiber into lower class neighborhoods in Colombia is valuable and necessary, and so is payments. So what describes the appetite of this capital to go against you and in favor of you, Jerry, for seemingly arbitrary reasons, especially because now venture capital is doing CapEx in the US. I mean, all of this AI is being funded by venture capital.
Absolutely. That's totally right, Shu. And I think, in a way, when we speak with venture capital, what we find is that we are too heavy. There is a lot of CapEx, there is a lot of people on the streets, and when we speak with infra funds, we grow too fast. We are too techy. So we think we are in a category that hasn't been named yet, and until this category isn't named, it's truly hard for the market to price it. And we think this category is infrastructure with software economics, and when done properly, it can mean a lot of growth, high margins, and at the same point, enable other things that are based on that infrastructure to flourish, like payments, like edtech, like everything that at the end of the day needs connectivity. There is still a 20% of the population that is not connected or is underconnected in Latin America and beyond.
Something I think, if I may, just like it's very interesting, and it's a recent development, is that I think we oftentimes, when speaking about investing in innovation, we talk about venture capital, and that's gone through a cycle. But something that's happened more recently is that there's other pools of capital that are also investing in innovation, and I think being able to match those pools of capital and their desired return profiles to the opportunity is something that's been happening much more as of late. For example, with Clara, we've raised over $200 million in equity to date. But actually, more of the capital that we've raised has different characteristics. So, for example, we partner closely with banks. And so we work with the IFC or World Bank, with Goldman Sachs and others, to be able to fund our payments product, like our corporate credit cards, in a post-pay capacity. And we can do that now more equity efficiently than any bank would, thanks to these partnerships. There's also capital like a fund that we work with from General Catalyst called Customer Value Fund, where they're funding S&M, so sales and marketing spend, so that instead of us using our equity dollars, which should go towards R&D as much as possible, we're able to use that pool of capital to fund the growth of the business. And so you combine kind of these different pools of capital with different return profiles, and that allows you to build a business in a much more capital efficient or appropriate way than would be possible before. And I think that's one of the more recent trends in the region that I'm particularly excited about.
Absolutely. Abdul Rahman, let me come to you. You've been actively investing in the Americas digital economy for about a decade now. What was the impetus to look west, and will you be doubling down in the future?
So to be clear here, I don't manage a fund. I don't build a product. I'm not an investment banker. But I represent a government, proudly represent the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, more specifically the Ministry of Investment. And through the ministry, our role is to ensure that the capital is flowing in an efficient way between Saudi and the Americas. Now, when we look at US, and Chris knows that very well, numbers speaks to itself. The relation stands alone. But when LatAm itself, what's different than the US is, I believe, is the awareness level. So when you look at LatAm, and if you don't know how to do business in Sao Paulo versus Bogota versus Asuncion or Buenos Aires, then you can't really operate in that part of the region. And just simply, like in Saudi, when we look into Latin America, we focus on our key sectors, and then we structure it across different countries. So we know when we look into Brazil, we look into food security and agriculture. When we look to Costa Rica, we look into ICT. When we look to Panama, we look into connectivity and ports and logistics. When we go to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Chile, we look into lithium and rare metals. So it depends on the sector, and when you map it across your key priorities, then you will be able to understand the region. But not only that, once we really understand the sectors, we look at three main elements. So first, our private companies, our national champions, and we have very good examples of Manara, who's our mining national company, who acquired a big stake of Valley Base Metal, but also Aramco, who just finalized their first retail investment in the downstream in Chile of 100% of ISMAX. So that shows you that's the level of awareness from private sector and the national champions. Then we go to the Saudi Fund of Development, which is the financing. So we're talking about financing tools in Argentina of $100 million, to San Lucia of a hospital of $75 million, to go all the way to Costa Rica or Guyana of a $50 million bridge. And we don't finance and leave. No, we finance to see the economies growing. So we stay on those economies to grow. And that takes me to also the last and the third elements, which are the investment banks, the investment firms, and people like Shu and Bicycle, who really understand the region very well, and through his lens can really help us to increase the awareness. And in fact, also it's worth highlighting that one of the largest investment banks in the region now, BTG Pactual, who's opened their headquarters to manage their deal flow between Saudi and America. So we see that level of financing. And to your question, Sasha, what are we doing and how are we? It's not about if we are going to invest, it's how we are investing in this region. And we are investing alongside partners and alongside long-term partnerships with the understanding of the region by being here on the ground. And I must just acknowledge His Excellency Fahd al-Saif, Minister of Investment, who was here in Miami in America Business Forum in November. So this is just a signal that Miami is not a city that we just visit, it's a city we invest in. And that's why we have our office here, to be closer to the Americas of a people of almost 1 billion population, to be close to this market.
Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts on what we've discussed so far, and I'd also like to ask you, how are government rules about national security affecting how money flows into tech companies across borders? What are your thoughts on that?
No, thanks for the question, and thanks to FII for having me here and this whole panel. So the president's made it very clear that America is open for business, and we're seeing record capital inflows from foreign direct investment, as America is the premier destination for capital. And to the point that we've been discussing, it's across sectors, it's across technologies. And what I lead is called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. And our lens is the national security piece that you were talking about. So I think I got it. Sorry. Thank you. And so what we look at in any particular transaction is that national security piece. And so we're trying to do things in the United States that help sort of fast track the investments, because whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, what you're looking for is certainty, right? And we're trying to set up a system or advance the system that's going to allow for that level of speed, for that level of certainty. Now, you may not always like the answer, but the reality is that we're seeing these capital inflows from all around the world. And in fact, I was meeting with some Florida bankers, and we were specifically talking about the activity in Latin America and the excitement that's happening. And we're going to see a lot of opportunity across the tech stacks. We're seeing a lot of activity in semiconductors, activity in quantum as well. And we want to welcome that. And so we've developed a program that's currently in its pilot phase called the Known Investor Program. And when you look at a transaction, there's two pieces to it. There's the parties and the transaction itself. And so what we're going to be doing is doing a deep dive on the investors, who are typically sort of frequent filers or folks that we see pretty often, so that we can actually move and concentrate on that transaction. And what we want to be able to do is engage with parties in advance of the transaction, because once it's closed, it's difficult for us to work with the parties to mitigate something. But if we can work with them on the front end and tell them the risks and concerns that we might have, they can bake that into the negotiations and the deal, which will make it easier for our team to be able to advance the project.
One thing that really frustrates me, so I used to invest in San Francisco also, and there's so much invention happening in the US. You mentioned a few things, quantum, AI now that everybody's talking about. And the diffusion of that invention tends to prioritize going to Europe first. And I wonder why it isn't the case that diffusion should first go south. And there's so many big markets and big customers to be had that the frontier of AI can be in San Francisco, but the first big customers outside the US should be Itaú and Claro and Vivo and B3 and all of these companies in Latin America that have such appetite for these technologies, but for some reason that connection between invention and diffusion doesn't go this way. It goes from the US then to Europe and sometimes to Japan. I wonder if you have a point of view on that.
Well, we certainly welcome innovation and invention in the United States, and we want to encourage that. But we work very closely with our international partners. One of the roles of my office is to provide technical assistance on investment screening in different countries. And we work in bilateral fashion very consistently. I think ultimately with that, though, it really is going to depend on what that country's investment appetite is and what they're focused on. So whether a country is focused on mining and critical minerals or something of that nature, we will provide technical assistance around that. But we certainly want to coordinate across the table on any type of innovation.
Shu, I'm curious because before this conversation, you talked about the importance of Chinese capital and companies coming into the region. Talk to us a little bit about what trends you've been seeing.
Yeah, I grew up in Kenya, and my dad was from a generation where there was a battle between Russia and the US for for the hearts and minds of the emerging world. And so a lot of students of his generation either went to the US for university or to Russia, believe it or not, for university. The same thing is happening now, but for technology. So in Latin America, I think this is ground zero. You have a direct battle between Chinese innovation and US innovation. And right now, Chinese innovation is winning because China has prioritized Latin America. Companies are opening offices in Latin America. If you drive through the streets of Costa Rica or Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, you will see Chinese EV ads everywhere and not a single one for Tesla. You will see Chinese food delivery companies and transportation ride-hailing companies opening in Mexico and Brazil. Everything from logistics to batteries to food delivery is happening from China, and the American companies are not prioritizing the region. So this is just something very apparent that's happening right now, and I think it's a big blind spot for the US.
Do you think over time that might become complicated when it comes to the fact that a lot of the investment might be in data-heavy businesses, critical infrastructure, and AI? You know, when are we going to get to that point? And also, what kind of figures are we talking about, if you can?
I don't know the numbers, but these are real efforts. And the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
This is a big geopolitical.
It's like a storm waiting to happen potentially.
Risk/advantage to China.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, I mean, maybe some of that is related to what Shu was mentioning, that it seems oftentimes like, yeah, like American companies may look towards like Europe or Japan even, whereas like I think like China thinks like, well, other emerging markets first. And so, yeah, I mean, what Shu's describing, something that's like very apparent on the ground. Perhaps an exception, though, and we recently released a report on like AI adoption trends, and you know most of the AI adoption is happening, you know, buying from U.S. companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, and you know there's been massive adoption around Latin America, very online society already, especially in Brazil, we're seeing the fastest adoption there. So that perhaps is an exception. But yeah, you don't see it necessarily translated to like the next level of like software development, right? Like some of the pains that we see, like businesses in the region talk to us a lot about is that, you know, a lot of this software is never adapted properly for, you know, the way that businesses in the region actually operate, right? Like they're expected to adapt to the software. And so I think, you know, especially now with how AI is making it possible to develop a lot more software efficiently, I think there's a great opportunity for LatAm.
Yes, actually, just give me I will give a perspective from Riyadh about the AI adoption. Actually, the Saudi government is one of the fastest growing government in AI adoption. In fact, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he designated the year of 2026 to be the year of artificial intelligence. And I've seen that in our office. When we look into investments now, we just don't like to invest in AI, but how we can invest with AI. And I truly believe that firms that are currently looking into bridge that gap of capital allocators who are looking for deals, or even people who are looking for funding, that some firms that they can come in and with AI they do it in 2 seconds or 2 minutes compared to 2 years just last year. So this firm, they will be ahead of the curve. And that's how we are looking at now to apply it also across our government agencies. And we've seen first-hand results in Latin America. Just to the point also about, Shu, what you mentioned about Latin America, we've seen the VC rebound now at $4.1 billion. But if you see the number of deals, they're at the absolute lowest since 2017. And reason why, because investors, they're coming with higher checks. So Latin America is a place where you have a higher concentration, and a patient capital will pay off. So last year we had only 2 unicorns in the whole LatAm with 660 million people. But I believe with a patient capital, you will see a big boom in the unicorns coming in Latin America in the next decade.
Let me just put a general question. When you're building, either if you're building or if you're funding a digital company across Latin America, does the region offer any structural advantage that Silicon Valley does not? Shu, maybe you'd be a good one to answer that.
It's hard to do business in. That's a structural advantage.
Could you unpack that a bit?
Yeah. My business partner is from Bolivia, and the Bolivian national team loves when people come to play them at home because it's 20,000 feet in the air and nobody can compete. It's that. So everything is a home game for the Latin American companies. And if you can navigate how to operate in Brazil or how to operate in Colombia or in Mexico or in Argentina, they're so different. And they're big markets.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for someone else to come in and compete. I'll give you an example. Brazil has, in my view, the most sophisticated financial services ecosystem in the world, like by far. Like you could buy a Starbucks coffee in installments, and by that afternoon, those flows have been securitized and are trading to family offices on the Brazilian stock exchange. It's really quite remarkable. Very difficult for a foreign bank to come in and figure out how to navigate all that complexity, which is why I'm so excited about businesses that are building locally in a different way, that are not just copies of what exists elsewhere, because you have to really tailor it. And the more unique something is, in Portuguese the word is jabuticaba, for this fruit that is very local. So the more jabuticabas you find that are just really weird, unique local businesses, the more you can be confident that you're onto something pretty interesting. And it's very difficult for folks from other countries, even China, to come and compete against that.
To show your business partners say that Latin America is the only place where you have more opportunities than capital.
Yes.
So I think that will pay off. And to the financial sector, I agree. I'm using Pix personally, and it's way better than Zelle or any other app you use here.
Best.
And then I think, I mean, you take that and then, you know, you compound it across like many different industries, verticals, because there's so much need, and you do see these, you know, big outcomes, these big compounders coming out of Latin America. I mean, you have a Mercado Libre, which nominally started being, you know, like the eBay for LatAm, but today it's a business that's worth, you know, 4 or 5 times as much, and, you know, it really, you know, it has very little to do with how it started, you know, where most of it business comes today.
It's as much financial services
exactly.
as it is retail, which is unique. Yeah.
The most valuable, you know, neobank in the world emerged out of Brazil, and now, you know, after serving now, I think 130 million consumers across the region, they're expanding into the U.S. and, you know, they're worth a lot more than any neobank in the U.S. has been able to achieve. Where I just think shows you, you know, how much opportunity there is in the region.
Emilian, yeah.
Yeah, no, and sorry, okay. No, I was going to say, and there are still basic opportunities that need to be fulfilled, and these in themselves are structural market opportunities. So take us as an example. We serve a segment that is a low-income segment in Colombia, in Argentina, and hopefully in other countries. And this is a segment that traditional telcos could not serve ever over the last 20 or 30 years. And this is not because there is no demand, it's mostly because it requires a different approach. You know, most of our people are daily earners, they make money by the day, so we need a model that is aligned to, that aligns the price to this market reality, and that opens up new opportunities. And this is just an example that can be replicated in payments and in several other segments across the region, I believe.
Chris?
I was just going to add that it's, I've been in Miami for the last couple of days, and I've just been actually just absolutely amazed at the economic development opportunities around here. We were with the Economic Development Group last night, and the fact that you've got just great inflows that are coming in is something that the America is just so excited about. And this conversation is incredibly encouraging because this level of dialogue is really important, particularly for the government, to be looking at the different types of deals and things that we're seeing. So whether it's tech transfer risk or whether it's privacy risk or data risk or things like that that we're looking at, we're always excited about the ability to have these engagements. Because then it allows us to, once again, have those conversations in advance about the mitigation strategies.
I love Miami because it's so close to the United States.
And there's more Spanish spoken here than in Mexico City. Or,
So I think we've got time for maybe just a couple more questions. And I'm wondering, do you think the next generation of breakout companies in the Americas is going to come from fintech, payments, or from something that no one in this room is talking about right now?
So I can add to that, because if you see fintech itself, and going back to my point about its lowest deal of number of deals since 2017, however, if you take the amount of deals that went to fintech, 60% went to fintech, but only a third of that as a number of deals. So there is a big concentration of a higher number of checks going to fintech, And because of the sophistication of the ecosystem that Shu mentioned in Brazil and in Costa Rica and so forth, I think that will be a big area there in LatAm, definitely.
I think it's really hard to draw lines in the way that we do in the US because the opportunity is to combine things. There's this concept of a compound startup, the idea that you're doing a lot of different products at once. China invented this idea of a super app, which is a bunch of different apps. That intuition is not really common in the US because we're so used to seeing single product companies that are so good at the thing and that's big enough. So the frame is something I struggle with because, for example, we have a company we invested in Brazil that leases motorcycles to couriers. So it's a motorcycle leasing company, but it's also a mechanic recruitment and training company. And it's also a fintech because for all of those people, it provides credit and payments and all these kinds of things. So I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, it's sort of back to your earlier
back to the
point,
point.
that it's all very specific.
Very
isn't it?
specific and much more multifaceted. Like you get a lot of things together. There's a beautiful company in Kazakhstan called Kaspi. A lot of people have heard about. Kazakhstan has 20 million people, and the GDP per capita is 13,000. And Kaspi is a $15 billion listed company in New York. Why? Because they do everything. Yeah. There is no Amazon and then something else. It's all one. Together. It's a bank, it's a retailer, it's where you get your driver's license, et cetera. So I think the opportunities in these combinations that are very unique species of business.
Yeah. Chris, final thought?
It's a fascinating conversation. We're seeing, as I mentioned, a lot in the AI space. We're seeing a lot in the quantum space, a lot of conversations about the space economy as well. So I think, once again, just having these conversations is incredibly important from a trend perspective. So from my world and my vantage point, we can make a determination as to where those risks might be.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Please join me in thanking my panel.
Thank you.
Bravo. Sasha, thank you so much. We are coming up on our last session, everybody. And this session, if you want to take your seats as we just switch our chairs around, this session, shh, if I could get the attention of the audience. This session is about connectivity and whether a more integrated corridor across the Americas could shape the hemisphere's future. So I'll be chatting with Ilan Goldfein. He's the president of the Inter-American Development Bank. First, a little news you might have heard last night, if you guys want to take your seats. IDB is starting an office here in Miami. IDB, of course, is the main development financier for Latin America and the Caribbean. Shh. If I can get your attention to either sit or keep it down a little bit. Thank you. Last year, IDB had a record year in lending at $35 billion, and IDB is becoming a private sector-led multilateral development bank. And so please join me in welcoming Ilan Goldfein.
Hello.
Pleasure. So we are the last session of the day, and I want to start a little bit about Latin America as the shift, not just a region of need, as I think it's fair to say historically, but as a region of opportunity from critical minerals and value-added supply chain, food security. Do you feel like we are in a different moment now, as some of our panelists have said today?
First, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I do believe this is the moment. I think we have a very relevant opportunity at the crossroads. First, it is the moment for the region. We had several shocks just lately. We had the pandemics, high interest rates, you name it, wars. And the region has been relatively stable, resilient. I mean,
all of us that know Latin America of the 80s and 90s and the crisis, balance of payment, and all of these issues. This is not there anymore. Where we are now, we are stable, but we need to grow. We need to go to the second level. And that's exactly where the moment is, how to take the opportunity of the different global context of that. The moment globally is also an important crossroad. On one side, global fragmentation, geopolitical issues. On the other side, technology boom. Both can be an opportunity together to Latin America. The world needs safe supply chains, for example, minerals, that will feed into this technological boom. So, for example, critical minerals. We have 40% of the minerals of the world. Can you devise a safe supply chains of aggregating value in the region that generates growth and income and provide these safe supply chains to a world that wants more reliable sources? So that combination makes it the right moment. Now, the fact that it's the right moment does not mean that it's already done. We need to seize the moment, and that's what we need to do together.
How much has it grown, sort of the foreign direct investment in Latin America?
Well, I think foreign investment has grown a little bit, but the key issue, the Achilles heel, is productivity. Basically, zero growth in productivity. And therefore, if you are a middle-income country, you will stuck to be a middle-income country for decades. And we tend to call it the lost decades. So we started with a lost decade, then we have another lost decade, and now we realize that we have basically stagnated for some time. So the region has a lot of good story to say. It has a bright future if it sees the opportunity, but we need to make it happen.
So for countries that are ready to seize that opportunity, how do they turn this moment of opportunity into lasting gains?
Well, that's what your introduction was very important. We need to understand that moving away from what is called the middle income trap, we'll need the private sector. I don't remember a country that can move out of the middle income or lower income without the private sector being very dynamic. So we need the private sector to be able to invest, to be dynamic, to create, to innovate. But then you need the governments to provide the enabling conditions, the regulations, the permissions, removing the barriers. So we need both of them together to make it happen.
Can we do a deeper dive into some of those barriers? Obviously, regulations can be barriers, infrastructure can be barriers, supply chain can be barriers. Walk me through how it is and what has to happen.
So all of this, for example, you go to Argentina and there are a huge program of deregulation that will help investment. You go to Bolivia now have all these restrictions, quotas, what you can do, what you cannot do, where the private sector can enter. You need to remove all of that. You go to Chile and they're working on the permissions. All of these are real examples on countries where the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, we work with them to see what are the best regulations, because we have the ear hearing the private sector tell us what do we need to invest. And then we work with the private sector through IDB Invest, which is our private sector hand, financing them long-term, because sometimes you don't have long-term financing, and we can finance 10 years, 15 years. We are AAA because of our shareholders. We have 48 countries, including the US, so we have AAA. We could transfer our costs and long-term financing, which is very important. And then we have the IDB Lab, which is our startup hand, the venture capital, so that we can foster innovation and productivity in the country. So enabling conditions and private sector just making the growth happen.
In that list, the role that the Inter-American Development Bank can play, what's the biggest challenge? I mean, you list connecting investors, you talk about the private public partnership. What do you see as the biggest challenge there?
So first, you need scale. Second, you need impact to make it happen. First, scale. We are getting there. We just had last year a record year, $35 billion of financing. That's 50% more than we have done 3 years ago. We just concluded the capitalization, $3.5 billion, which makes it double what the IDB Invest will have for the next years. I think we can reach $500 billion in 10 years. So we are getting there, and we just approve a capitalization. It's not easy to get capitalization out of 48 countries. Imagine each one goes to Congress and approving a budget. But we just done it. And then we got the replenishment, which is the donors for the IDB Lab, which is the grants. That's just happened 2 weeks ago. And we just opened the office in Miami yesterday, because we want to be close to the investors, to the decision makers. We want to be able to bring our projects. We have, just in terms of procurement and bidding process, $4.5 billion of subways and bridges and infrastructure that we can bring here. And we want to also bring the investors to Latin America. So we want to be the bridge. So scale, have the resources, and second, have the impact and being close. And that's what we are trying to do. And I think we have gone a long way in the last year or more.
What do you most credit for that record level of investment? You said up 50%.
Well, a lot of demand for infrastructure, a lot of demand of policy reforms, because we do have our loans, which are policy to governments, and infrastructure to private sector. So infrastructure, tourism, innovation, health part, water and sanitation. Some countries have just opened their market, and it's a huge boom in water and sanitation. Others are now doing mining. They want financing mining. It's a hot issue on providing several mining, so you have to have financing for that. We are the breadbasket of the world, the food. So agriculture, technology. How are you going to bring technology to agribusiness? And I can go on and on. A huge demand for financing in the region, for technology, and to the largest development bank, that is IDB, to actually provide that.
Do you see the idea of an American corridor turning into a reality, and when?
It's already turning into reality. We can, as I mentioned at the beginning, we can lose the opportunity and we can not seize it, but it's happening. I mean, you asked me about the record level of the IDB. It's a record level everywhere. Demand is there. Countries want to invest. I mean, we see countries just elected, and the new governors, the new government wants to invest more. They are coming here. I mean, you just heard the vice president of Ecuador talking to you guys about what they want to do. The president is a businessman. He wants to be here. You go to Paraguay, a smaller country, open for business, becoming an investment grade, and it's very important for them. We are helping the countries to get into OECD, helping them. How do I get there? So we got Argentina and Paraguay and Uruguay, and everybody wants to be there now. And then we got the Mercosur agreement. After decades, no agreement, suddenly you have the Mercosur-EU agreement. They want to be open to the world. Things are happening. And I think we need to make it happen. And I think the corridor that you mentioned is something that's already happening. But we need to all work together. And I think this conference, the FII, Latin America, is a way for us to reach that bridge.
A couple of panels before us talked about some of the risks that exist. How do you think about risk in this area?
Well, there are a lot of risks. I mean, I just mentioned a fragmented world. We are in the middle of the war. There are high interest rates. There were not so low interest rates. Everything is there that could, if you look at it with the glass half empty, you'll find a lot of things to say, oh my God, this is not going to happen. We're just under a shock. Oil prices are more expensive. But you can look at it other ways. Well, the world now needs safety, needs values that are close to this hemisphere. I think this is a world and the future of Latin America.
Where, meaning in what country and in what industry, do you see the most opportunity, and where do you see the biggest challenge?
So I have a problem because I am the president of the Development Bank that have 26 members of this region. So if I tell you it's Argentina...
Like picking your favorite child.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I understand. But
Argentina,
I'm going to make you pick
not
your
Brazil?
favorite child.
If I say Brazil, why not Bolivia? I mean, the smaller, even the Caribbean, the small island. I mean, we are present even in Haiti, which is the most vulnerable, and we're trying to help Haiti. So we are in all the places. Each place has its own comparative advantage. So when we go to Uruguay, we want to create an innovation hub there. When we talk in Ecuador, we want to make it business-oriented, talk about security, how we can advance that. When we go to Bolivia, how we can remodel Bolivia to be a market economy, and so on and on. When you go to Mexico, how we re-engage the private sector in large investments. So each country has its own priority. What we cannot do is have something ready for everybody. Say, oh, same thing, same plan, same program, same strategy. That will not work.
Is there a prediction that you would make about what could be successful? Let's look down 10, 12 years. That would surprise people.
Is productivity growth 2, 3, 4%, countries going 5 or 6%. Paraguay just grew 5% last year. Dominican Republic just grew a few years, very high rates. Brazil reached 3%, still low. It may go to 2. What will surprise me is if we get it to 4 or 5%. And suddenly the region, instead of being a stagnant and lost decade, it's a surprise region with high investment, high productivity, and we can get all of these countries to another level.
I only have a minute left for you, so I'm curious. So we talked about the move to Miami. Does that mean you're here now? How do you see that changing what you're doing?
So we are in 26 countries. Every country we have an office of 100 people, 50 people, and our headquarters is in Washington, D.C. That's where it was created in 1959. So for 7 decades, people say, should we move to Miami? Yeah, let's do it. And 7 decades. So I said...
What made it right now?
Because this is the moment for the private sector-led development. This is the moment where governments realize that they don't have the resources, they cannot make it happen. So we need to be where Latin America is very present. When you go in the corner and you speak Spanish, sometimes you speak even English.
Spanglish.
But that's the Latin America place where we need to be, so that's why we open our office. We're going to staff the office with the private sector people to foster and to get deals done for the region.
Excellent. Ilan Goldfein, so nice to chat with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So obviously today has focused a lot on opportunity. I'm just going to do a quick summary for you and then give you some housekeeping, and then I will let everybody go off to lunch. Clearly, tremendous opportunity. You heard people almost bristling at the word evolution, feeling like, no, we've already had the evolution. We're here already, moving forward. It's in process, but risk clearly exists. The focus has to be on mitigating risk. Seriously, deeply ingrained risks. You heard people talking about cartels in some regions. The Wild West has been described, which makes it obviously impossible to build business. But being able to overcome and build stability in the region is extremely likely, and you've heard a ton of hope from all of our panelists. Human capital, we've heard, is essential and a real opportunity in Cuba, in Argentina, in Brazil. And then finally, learning the lessons of the past where politics and maybe policies have failed or maybe not fully learned, but if you take advantage of this moment of improved relations, of gaining the trust of the public, we actually could be moving forward. So tomorrow we're going to focus on the US-LatAm relationship specifically. Brief housekeeping notes for you, side program and invite-only conclaves in the breakout rooms of the Faina Hotel run from 1:30 to 4:40. The networking breakfast will start tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. and the plenary program starts sharply at 8:30 a.m. I will see you all then. Thank you.